today we are going to talk about Angelos' monologue from the play Measure for Measure. And the next time someone says, Shakespeare isn't relevant today, point them to this monologue. While initially categorized as a comedy in the first folio, scholars now commonly categorize Measure for Measure in the subgenre of problem plays, a term that was first applied to some of Shakespeare's plays in the late 1890s. Now, there are three plays that we consider problem plays: Measure for Measure, All's Well That Ends Well, and Troilus and Cressida. So what makes a problem play? It's a play that's perplexing. These plays deal with an abundance of complex moral issues and have an essence of uncertainty about them. And because of this, we feel uncomfortable giving it a title of straightforward comedy or straightforward tragedy. Measure for Measure concerns itself with morality, virtue, sin, death, punishment, and atonement, which is fitting since one interpretation of the title is that it comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This title also has a legal connotation to it. That is the idea that when a person commits a crime or a sin, he or she should be made to pay, either by making some sort of restitution or by suffering an amount that's equal to the crime or the sin that they just committed. So it's that whole an eye for an eye kind of deal. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, measure for measure. So this play takes place in Vienna. And at the top of the play, our man Angelo is given temporary control of Vienna from the Duke, because the Duke decides to go off on a diplomatic mission, but he doesn't actually leave. He stays in his disguise and is like spying on people. That's a whole other thing to get into, but he leaves Angelo in charge while he's gone. And so with this temporary control from the Duke, Angelo decides to forcefully wield his power. There are a lot of brothels in Vienna, apparently. According to this play, there's a lot of brothels. And even though there are already laws and regulations in place for these institutions against unlawful sexual behavior that might occur, Angelo, who's now like power hungry, I guess, decides to enforce these already existing laws more strictly. Incredibly unwavering in his strict and moral views, Angelo wants to set an example for the Viennese citizens. So what he does is he sentences a man named Claudio to death for impregnating his lover Juliet, even though the couple is engaged to be married and the act was completely mutual. Now we come to Isabella, Claudio's sister and the heroine of Measure for Measure, and the person to whom Angelo is talking to in this upcoming monologue. Isabella is a novice. She is on her way to enter the nunnery. You know, she's kind of like Maria in Sound of Music before she gets called away. And she's about to take her vows and enter the nunnery and become a nun full-time when she hears about her brother Claudio's arrest. So what she does is she leaves, she goes to Vienna, and she is chaste and strong and religious and virtuous and moral. She is just such a pillar of strength and just so passionate about her beliefs. And she visits Angelo to plead for her brother's life because she doesn't believe he's done anything to warrant this death sentence. In Act 2, Scene 4, where this monologue takes place, after much back and forth, Angelo declares his love for Isabella, to which Isabella confronts Angelo's hypocrisy. My brother did love Juliet, and you tell me that he shall die for it. And Angelo responds with, he shall not, Isabel, if you give me love. Angelo, this man in power, this man who is literally holding the fate of his citizens in his hands, tells Isabella that he'll spare her brother's life if she gives herself up to him. He reiterates this again much more bluntly in the monologue about giving her body to him, about sleeping with him. If she sleeps with him, he will refute her brother's death sentence. And now he's the one pointing out his own hypocrisy. When she hears this, Isabella is simultaneously taken aback at Angelo's admission of his feelings for her and what he wants from her. And she also then realizes that she can use this as ammunition against him to free her brother. So she says, I will proclaim thee, Angelo, look for it. Sign me a present pardon for my brother, or with an outstretched throat, I'll tell the world aloud what man thou art. Sign my brother's pardon, or I will tell the entire world what kind of hypocritical, slimy man you really are. She's got him now, right? Angelo then begins his monologue with what I think is not just the most chilling line in this play, but is one of the most chilling lines in all of Shakespeare. Who will believe thee, Isabel? With my reputation, with my good name, my powerful position, who would believe you over me? He goes on to tell her that if she goes out and speaks ill of him or tells people of this offer, she'll be silenced, she'll be discredited, she'll be accused of slander, and essentially she'll have her entire character completely obliterated. And those of us who are watching this unfold in the audience, because right now, as this is happening, this scene, it's just the two of them. There is nobody else in the room. So when he says, who will believe thee, Isabel? We're sitting there and we're fuming, but at the same time we go, oh my God, he's right. He's absolutely right. Shakespeare writes some of, if not the most beautiful poetry, and yet sometimes his most plain and basic words strike the truest chord. I mean, that line, who will believe thee, Isabel? It could have been written today. Now, when I look at a monologue, when I approach a monologue, whether it's from an actor's perspective, a director's perspective, or merely to analyze, I always go to the punctuation. Shakespeare gives us so much detail in punctuation marks. In Isabella's lines right before Angelo's monologue, she has a few exclamation points. Now, that doesn't mean she's yelling, but she's certainly worked up about something. Angelo's hypocrisy and wanting her brother's freedom. So the exclamation points are there to help that energy and that emotion come through, the urgency of it. That's why we exclaim something. That's why it has its own punctuation mark. So there is this passionate and astonishing energy abounding from Isabella. Angelo is not energized in the same way that Isabella is. There are no exclamation points in his monologue. He is extremely matter of fact. He's doing business. He is calm, cool, and collected. And unlike Isabella, he has nothing to lose. He can just say what he needs to say without making a point to stress the importance of it. He can just say it. Another interesting thing to note is that Angelo's monologue is written in iambic pentameter, as Shakespeare frequently does, like we all know this. But the first line doesn't follow that like the rest of his monologue does, right? So his first line is, who will believe the Isabel? And if we're doing the da-dum, 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 who will believe the Isabel? Or who will believe the Isabel? But either way, it doesn't get to those 5 syllables. Who will believe the Isabel? We're still missing one. Or who will believe the Isabel? But the rest of his monologue does follow the iambic pentameter structure. Well, that's because his first line in his monologue actually completes the iambic pentameter that Isabella's final line begins. So before Angelo starts his monologue, Isabella's final line is, what man thou art. And then Angelo says, who will believe thee, Isabel? So if we look at that, what man thou art, and that's where we get into who will believe thee, Isabel. And yes, I know that's kind of cheating, but that Shakespeare does that a lot because he wants to fit his words in there. What man thou art, who will believe thee, Isabel. So it completes that iambic pentameter phrasing. So the fact that both Isabel and Angelo share this iambic tells us that they're connected. And this issue is not going to go away anytime soon. This is serious. And this does end up being the crux of the play from here on out. I mean, there's this whole thing with a bed trick, which I should talk about that another day because that's wild. And this whole thing of, an eye for an eye, measure for measure. Angelo kind of gets off easy in the end, in the grand scheme of things. So this is the crux of the play, and it's not going to go away, and it's connected. They are connected. They share that iambic pentameter line. It's easy to play Angelo as a straight-up villain. And the easy way is oftentimes the boring way. Just like when you're playing other Shakespearean villains like Richard III, Lady Macbeth, Iago, Tamara, you can't just say, oh, I'm a bad guy, I'm evil, I just like to do mean things because I'm a jerk. No, you can't just do that. Shakespeare doesn't write two-dimensional characters. Even Iago, the most dastardly evil villain, has his reasons for doing what he does. You have to dig deep, and you have to find out what makes them tick, why they are the way that they are. So with Angelo, we're definitely not rooting for him. Let me make that perfectly clear. I mean, don't play him evil, but also, he's not good. We don't like him. In fact, if you can find a way to make me sympathize with him, props to you. But we have to play detective and find out why Angelo is hypocritical. What is it about his relationship with morality and justice that is causing him so much turmoil? So when you listen to this monologue, give that a think. You should simultaneously be uncomfortable with what Angelo is saying, while also wondering, how is it that a man with such strict morals could fall so far?
Who will believe thee, Isabel? My unsoiled name, the austereness of my life, my vouch against you, and my place at the state, will so your accusation overweigh, that you shall stifle in your own report, and smell of calumny. I have begun, and now I give my sensual race the rein. Fit thy consent to my sharp appetite. Lay by all nicety and prolixous blushes that banish what they sue for. Redeem thy brother by yielding up thy body to my will. Or else he must not only die the death, but thy unkindness shall his death draw out to lingering sufferance. Answer me tomorrow, or By the affection that now guides me most, I'll prove a tyrant to him. As for you, say what you can. My false o'erweighs your true.